Hi everyone, welcome. Rabbi Julia Andelman here at JTS, Director of Community Engagement. We're so pleased that you've joined us for our Rabbinic Hanukkah webinar, Wonder of Wonders, Wonder of Wonder, Miracle of Miracles, the Lessons of the Hanukkah Miracle, with our teacher, Dr. Marjorie Lehman, who I'll introduce in a moment. So thank you for being here with us. I wanted to just briefly highlight a couple of terrific programs coming up. Next week, we have a live online mini course starting on Wednesday, the 5th, December 5th, Resisting the Final Solution. This is on cultural, spiritual, and armed resistance to the Holocaust. It's going to be an excellent course. We've brought in our JTS fellow, Dr. Alyssa Ben-Porad, to teach that, so I highly recommend it. Everything that I'm telling you now will be in the follow-up email, but I just wanted to mention it to you. And in the spring semester, we have a course, again, a live online mini course on Israeli music and national culture in January. And then in February, an advanced mini course for rabbis and others with advanced text skills on Vayikra with our own Professor Ben Summer. So those are the live online courses coming up. The topic at hand, Hanukkah, we have some terrific resources online that we will email you, and I wanted to especially call your attention to this adorable little handout. Can you see it? It's called Hanukkah Nights. It has a text, an insight from a JTS teacher, and kind of a thought-provoking question for every night. It has the brachot, it has Ma'os Tzur, it has Hanei Rod Halalu. So we would love for you to print it out and put it out in your shuls or schools or wherever you are and share it with people for Hanukkah next week. And I have been getting continued inquiries about RTI, even though the deadline is passed. We are officially full, but we always have a few last-minute cancellations because of funerals, because of our line of work. So I can let in a couple additional people, but you have to contact me like today. Okay, so moving on to today's program, I want to just acknowledge the other JTS staff in the room, our colleague, Rabbi Tim Bernard, who's Director of Digital Learning here at JTS, our awesome new media staff. Thank you for making these programs happen for us. This webinar will last approximately an hour and 15 minutes. If you haven't already printed the source sheet from Dr. Lehman, you should do that now, or at a minimum download it, which you can do using the link above the video box on your screen. Professor Lehman will answer specific questions during the webinar, meaning if you have something where you feel like it really requires prompt clarification, we'll take those questions, but otherwise we'll do Q&A at the end, even though I know that's not your preference, but that's how it tends to work best with these webinars. The way to submit your question is, the best way is in the chat window below the video box. You can do that at any time. If you have a problem with the chat window, you can also email rabbinicresources@jtsa.edu with webinar question in the subject line, but use the chat window if you can. And we'll try to get to as many questions as we can, but probably won't get to all of them. And in advance, I want to ask you to please do fill out the very short evaluation below at the end of the webinar. So if you have to sign off early before I ask you to do that at the end, I'm asking you now. Okay, it's now my great pleasure to introduce Marjorie Lehman, who is Associate Professor of Talmud and Rabbinics at JTS, and her research centers on Agadah, on Jewish gender studies, the history of the Hebrew book, and the scholarship of teaching. She has published the Ein Yaakov, Jacob Ibn Habib's Search for Faith in the Talmudic Corpus, and she recently co-edited two works that probably a lot of you have heard about, Mothers in the Jewish Cultural Imagination and Learning to Read Talmud, What It Looks Like When It Happens. That was with our colleague Jane Kanarak, right? She has been a fellow at the Herbert D. Katz Center for Advanced Judaic Studies at the University of Pennsylvania as part of a cohort of scholars working on feminist commentaries on the Bavli. Her research has been specifically on Yoma. And she was also the co-director of Footprints, Jewish Books Through Time and Place, a digital humanities project. Professor Lehman serves on the advisory board of the Jewish Day School Standards and Benchmarks Rabbinics Initiative, which I'm sure some of you have been involved in. She's Rabbinics Advisor at the Frankel Jewish Academy in Michigan and the Gesher Jewish Day School in Virginia. She also serves on the advisory board of the Center for Jewish History and the editorial board of the journal Teaching Theology and Religion. You get around, Marjorie. She's lectured widely in both academic and non-academic contexts. And I'm not even going to read them all because there's so many, but I'll throw in Camp Ramah because we all love Camp Ramah. Thank you so much for teaching us today.
Thank you for introducing. And hello, everybody, and almost happy Hanukkah. So I was trying with this session to pick some sources that would not necessarily be the ones that we associate with Hanukkah, and I think that we're all familiar with so many of the sources. We teach from the Bavli, My Hanukkah. We are quite aware of the tensions that underlie the creation of the holiday of Hanukkah, whether it is miracle or representing some type of military victory. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to bring you a text that helped us to frame or even get around the question of what is a miracle, how do we define what a miracle is, do miracles inform the way we take initiative? So if we believe that a miracle could happen, it might prevent us from taking more initiative, human initiative. The other question is if I believe, let's say if I do not believe in miracles and I don't necessarily associate Hanukkah or any other Chag with miracle, then am I an insider or am I an outsider? Where is my place in all of this? I think the rabbis were struggling with the issue of miracle. I don't mean that they weren't believing that the Yam Suf, the Red Sea, split into two, but I do think that they were struggling with whether miracles happen in their own day. They knew that prophecy had ended. They knew that no longer were they communicating directly with God in that way. But at the same time, they really wanted to believe that God actually had some role in their lives, and actually miracles could happen in the rabbinic period. So I decided I should bring some material that has the rabbis struggling with how to define miracle, what it is, who gets the rights to have miracles performed for them, and then to also discuss the other side of the coin, which is human initiative and us taking action. I think it's well known that certainly we could quote Zechariah and start out by saying, Lo b'chayil, lo b'koach, ki im beruchi, amar Hashem tzebaot. We could start by saying, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, said the Lord of hosts, meaning that everything comes from God, that we're not actually going to rise up and take action, but we rely on everything as God does. Or we could take the other approach, which is to see Hanukkah as a military victory of sorts, although I'm sure you all know that really Hanukkah is about the rededication of the temple, and that the military conquest takes years. It continues even after the temple is rededicated, but it does definitely conjure for us the idea of fighting for what we feel is our own and overcoming what it is we feel that we're entitled to. And so it definitely represents the issue of human initiative. Just to quote Yitzchak ben Tzvi, who was an early pioneer and later second president of the State of Israel, he wrote in 1911, "The glory and the educational value of the Hasmoneans is that their example revived the nation to be its own redeemer and the determiner of its own future." So I think we're caught in Hanukkah, when we talk about Hanukkah, between the idea of miracle and the idea of our own human initiative. So that said, I bring you now to some sources in Masechet Ta'anit, in Tractate Ta'anit. The piece that I'm going to bring you falls right in the center of a conversation that's happening around disaster. What happens in cases where you are experiencing some type of either natural disaster on some level, and you fast. And the idea of fasting in order to change God's role in that. The belief, of course, is that by fasting, you're essentially doing tshuva, and the hope is, of course, that God will listen and will heed your call, and that things will improve or things will get better. So within that context, I'm going to bring you some stories about a few rabbis. We're going to look at mostly, our main focus will be on Rav Huna, Rav Adar bar Ahava. They will be our two major foci, and we're going to learn about Rav Huna in his early years and then in his later years. So there are sort of two Rav Hunas that are going to be presented to us here. And there are other rabbis that are quoted as well. Okay, so I just want to say that if you downloaded the handout yesterday, there's a typo or two, and so I'm just going to key you into the fact that where the text says on the right-hand side, Inami de Kaiman Aguda de Nahara, that's actually not part of the text that I want to share with you. It comes from the immediately prior point, and so I'm going to start with Ki Hahi, but of course starting with V'chen ir sheyesh ba davar o mapolet, V'chen ir sheyesh bo dever o mapolet v'chulei. So basically we're talking here, that's a quote from the Mishnah, which is talking about a city that is afflicted by pestilence or collapsing buildings, and public fasts are commanded. And then the Gemara goes on this way. If you're looking at the Gemara in Ta'anit, if you're looking at the Daf, it's in the middle of page Kaf Amud Bet. Okay. So Hahi Ashita Ru'ah Dehave ben Naharda Delo Have Chalif Rav Shmuel Tuta Afal Gav Dekaima Be'atra Tlesar Shanim Yom Echad Ikla Rav Adar bar Ahava Lahatam Amar Le Shmuel Rav Nete Mar Nakif Amar Le Lo Tzarichna Ha'idna De'ika Rav Adar bar Ahava Behadan Denafish Zuchute Velo Mistafina. So what's happening here? So we have a case in which there is this either building or wall that is threatening itself to collapse. And under it, Rav and Shmuel would not go because basically, even though it stood up for 13 years, they were very nervous that it would fall upon them. So one day, Rav Adar bar Ahava happened to come to this area, and as they passed by this wall that looked a bit dilapidated, Shmuel said to Rav, "Come, let us go around the wall so that we do not stand beneath it," fearful, of course, that it might collapse on them. And Rav said to him, "It's not necessary to do that today, as Rav Adar bar Ahava is with us, whose merit is so great, and therefore I know and I am not afraid that it will collapse." The presumption here, of course, is that Rav Adar bar Ahava has some sort of lucky charm status. He's on some level able to protect them. He has a different status from them. I mean, we are talking the great rabbis, Rav and Shmuel, but for some reason, this particular rabbi has greater clout. And so as a result of being with him, they feel that they are protected. Okay, this is the next piece, which is actually, if you see in the English, I have them marked as A, B, C, D. I'm now at C, but I'm going to read in the Aramaic. I do want you at the end, if we have time, and I'm hoping there'll be obviously time for question and answer, that you might bring up the piece that in fact had the greatest impression on you and might want to refer to it and discuss really with everybody why you feel it had or resonated with you the most. But anyway, the story, I mean, as the Gemara continues in C, now we have Rav Huna. Rav Huna havele hahu chamra behahu beta ri'ah ubai lipnuye. Aile l'Rav Adar bar Ahava lahatam mashke b'shamata ad depanye batar de nafak nafal bete. So basically we're introduced to Rav Huna. And Rav Huna had what I think, although I have to say that the translations are not amazing here. They are downloaded from Sefaria, and so I may depart a little bit from them. The translation says a certain quantity of wine. Basically, I think it's chamra. It's a bottle of wine or a barrel of wine. Rav Huna basically has a bottle of wine in a house that is somehow rickety or about to collapse, and he's afraid to go into the building alone, and he wants that wine. So he brings Rav Adar Bar Ahava there. He entices him with a conversation about something, shamata. They translate here halacha. So he speaks Torah to him in order to kind of draw him near and brings him into this house. And as a result, he's able to remove the wine. As soon as they leave, the building collapses, and they're okay, because basically the wine is saved, Rav Huna is saved, and Rav Adar Bar Ahava has been the lucky charm who has enabled this to happen. When Rav Adar Bar Ahava realizes what has just happened, he becomes angry. And the Gemara moves on to tell us that the reason for why Rav Adar Bar Ahava got angry, and we'll leave aside for the fact that he was sort of tricked into kind of being drawn in to this situation. But the Gemara goes on to tell us, Savar la, this is D, Savar la ki had amar Rabbi Yanai, leolam al yamod adam bimakom sakana v'yomar osin li nes, shema ein osin lo nes. So Rav Ada would hold or held like Rabbi Yanai, who basically said that a person should never stand in a place of danger and say, a nes, a miracle is going to happen for me, and I will escape unharmed, because that miracle might not happen. So the Gemara here understands that what has happened is that Rav Adar Bar Ahava had the power to perform some type of a miracle, and had the power to essentially enable Rav Huna to be protected long enough to be able to get his bottle of wine or his cup of wine out of the house. And his Rav Adar Bar Ahava's reaction, his anger, is that he's upset that Rav Huna actually believed or relied on his miracle prowess or his ability to bring about this miracle. And so there's a warning here. And then the Gemara goes on. This is the bottom of page 1. V'im timtzi lomar osin lo nes menachin lo mischuyotav. So if you say that a miracle will be performed for this person, a person can expect, and if it is that a person can expect a nes to happen, then, or if the nes in fact does happen, then what happens is it's deducted from his merits. Okay, let me repeat that so it's clearer. So if you say that a miracle will be performed, and you believe that a miracle will be performed for you, then what happens is that it becomes deducted from all the merits you have brought about through your life. So it is clear that what is unclear is that the word chuyotav could either refer to the person who's doing the miracle or the person who's receiving the miracle. Now, I think in this context, it's the person who receives the miracle. So presumably this would have been Rav Huna. And because Rav Huna had this miracle performed for him by Rav Adar Bar Ahava, it would mean that his merits were therefore lessened for the future. So that everyone's sort of given this reservoir of a certain amount of like miracle power, and you can use it up. Alternatively, and some of my students have argued, no, it's really the zchuyot of Rav Adar Bar Ahava, that it was his merit as the one who was performing the miracle, that he only has a certain amount, and therefore it gets used up. He won't be able to perform anymore. Now, in typical Gemara fashion, they bring a pasuk in order to support this idea. So Amar Rav Chanan, Ma'ikra, dichtiv, katonti mikol chasadim umikol ha'emet. The context here, basically I'll just translate it. It's written, I have become small from all the mercies and all the truth, which I'm not sure is exactly the best translation in Breshit. But basically, in other words, the more benevolence one receives from God, the more his merit is reduced. What's the context here? I'm always telling, I always say, look at the context. What's going on here so that we can compare it to what happened before it. The context here is Yaakov and Esav. So Yaakov and Esav, Yaakov is at the moment where he's about to meet Esav, and he's asking God to protect or to help him because he's scared that basically Esav is upset with him for his trickery. So just like you had Rav Huna, who was kind of a bit deceitful, you also have Yaakov, and this sort of conjures up the Yaakov who was a bit deceitful. And so he's worried about Esav, and he turns to God and he says, I don't really deserve all your mercy, but I need it now. I need you to help me. So I know that I'm less. I know that I'm diminished. I know that I'm smaller and may not deserve this, but I want you, God, to help me. And as a result of that, we're supposed to interpret this as God then responding to Yaakov, and Yaakov having a miracle in a way, or at least God's help, in his reconnection, meeting up with Esav. Now, if we compare the request that Yaakov makes and the situation that Yaakov is in with the situation that happened immediately prior with Rav Huna, on some level there's something a little bit uncomfortable happening. Rav Huna feels like, you went in for what? You went in for this material object, this bit of wine, and that's why you needed this great Rav Adar Bar Ahava and any power that he could conjure from God? That's why you went in? But when it came to Yaakov and Esav, well, that's a much bigger issue and problem. That's a much more concerning issue. And so it's amazing to me that they juxtapose this notion of wanting God's help in a small little case with a much more important case, which is, of course, Yaakov wanting to re-meet or reconcile with his brother Esav. I'm not exactly sure what to make of that, but I think it's the rabbis telling us that we desire miracle. We desire help in so many aspects of our lives. And bad things can happen whether we're doing the smallest thing or the largest thing. And we always want and hope in those moments when we feel we're in danger, we really want nace. We really want miracle. And sometimes it will happen, and sometimes, obviously, it will not. Now, if you turn to page 2, so at the point at which now the Gemara wants to know why it is that Rav Adar Bar Ahava has this zchut. Why does he have this great merit? What has he done to deserve what he gets that makes Rav and Shmuel and Rav Huna not have? So what is it that he's done? And they give us a description here of what Rav Adar Bar Ahava has done. And I want you to keep in mind the description because they're going to then move on to Rav Huna in his old age and the things that Rav Huna does in his old age, which are going to be different from the things which Rav Adar Bar Ahava does here. And I want you to just sort of think about the differences and what it is the rabbis are thinking brings Rav Adar Bar Ahava his merit. And so here's the list. So basically it's Mai Hava Uvde de Rav Adar Bar Ahava. So what were the things that Rav Adar Bar Ahava did? Had to eat Marshalu Talmidav at Rabbi Zera, the Amrela. Maybe it was asked, maybe the students asked it of Rabbi Zera, maybe they asked this to Rav Adar Bar Ahava himself. B'meh he'erachta yamim. Amar lahem, mi amai. Lo hikpadati betoch beiti, v'lo tza'adati bifnei misha gadol mimeni, v'lo hirharti b'mivo ot hamitunafot, v'lo halachti dalid arba amot below Torah, u'below tefillin, v'lo yashanti b'beit hamidrash, lo shenat keba, v'lo shenat arai, v'lo sasti b'takalat chaverai, v'lo karati l'chaverai, or l'chaveri, it's probably l'chaverai, b'chanichato ve'amrei la b'chanichato. So what is the list here? In all my days, I did not become angry with my household, meaning any one of my family members. I never walked in front of somebody who was greater than me. I do not think about matters of Torah in places where I shouldn't be, filthy alleyways. Only in the Beit Midrash, only in places that are respectful. I never walked 4 cubits without engaging in Torah or without putting on my tefillin. I would not fall asleep in the study hall, neither a deep sleep or a brief nap. I would never rejoice in the mishap of my colleague, and I would not call my colleague by his nickname, and some say I would not call my colleague by his derogatory family name, not that there were really family names in those days, but basically sometimes they would call the person by their profession, nagar, or whatever their profession was, and so you wouldn't necessarily refer to somebody without calling them by their right and full name. So in this list, we see everything that's human, like anything that's kind of a human-to-human treatment. So everyone who Rav Adar Bar Hava comes into contact with, who lives in his home, he has a wonderful relationship with. He never gets angry, which is hard to do, as we all know. Depending on what's going on in your household, when he's in the Beit Midrash, he has respect for whatever's happening in the Beit Midrash, who's ever teaching him, whatever he's learning. He treats other people well by never rejoicing when something bad happens to a colleague. He even makes sure to call everybody by their right name. So on some level, they're telling us that Rav Adar Bar Hava has really great interactions with other human beings and really cares for them. He also has a connection to spirituality, meaning learning Torah and mitzvot. He puts on his tefillin, walks with them all the time. Also he treats with reverence places, physical places. For example, like the Beit Midrash, he doesn't fall asleep in the Beit Midrash, and he makes sure that anger doesn't inhabit his household. And so as a result, the physical spaces in which he inhabits are also important, and he respects. So therefore, it pulls together the human ben adam lemakom aspects, the human ben adam lechavero aspects, the spiritual aspects of relationship with God, as well as even the physical spaces in which he inhabits. So, and for that, he gets this ability to be this lucky charm, to channel God into moments, and to help somebody like Rav Huna get or remove this, let's say, bottle of wine from this household that he wants to remove it from. Now, with that, we now are going to move to Rav Huna. And so now we're going to set up the comparison between Rav Huna and Rav Adar Bar Hava, remembering, of course, Rav Huna from the immediately prior example of Rav Huna and his bottle of wine or cup of wine. And so this is F, the middle of page 2. Amar le Rava le Rafram bar Papa, le Malan, mar mehane mile me'alyata dehave aved Rav Huna. So now we have Rava says to Rafram bar Papa, tell me some of those things that Rav Huna did. Okay, so now that we've learned about what Rav Adar Bar Hava was like, now we want to know, well, what was Rav Huna like? And he responds and says, Amar le, he responds, Biyankute lo dekirna, besibute dekirna, dekol yoma de'eva havu mafkin le bekorhaka, didehava, it's a gorhaka didehava, besayer la lekula mata, bekol ashita dehavat ri'ata have satarla. I efshar lamara bane la, be'i lo efshar bane la ihu midide. Basically, the answer here of Rafram to Rava is, I don't really remember what he did in his youth, but I do know what he did in his old age. That I remember, Tekirna from Zachar. That I remember. That every day, every cloudy day, that he would go out in this golden carriage, and he would be up on top of the city viewing what was around him, and he would look to see where there was any kind of wall or building that was unstable, and he would tear down the unstable walls because he was afraid that it would start to rain, something would collapse, and somebody would get hurt. And if its owner was not able to build another, Rav Huna, if the owner was able to build another, had enough money to be able to build a new wall or a new structure, then Rav Huna would tell him, look, you've got to go and rebuild that because this is dangerous. And if he was unable to rebuild it, Rav Huna would build it himself with his own money. So I think what we're getting here is kind of this conflicting, slightly conflicting image of Rav Huna, who was somebody in his older age that took initiative. There's no miracles happening here. He sees rain coming. He decides, okay, we've got to take care of ourselves. We better protect ourselves from being hurt. What are we going to do? We're going to rebuild anything that we feel is going to fall, so that everyone will, in the end, have a structure. Have a structure to protect themselves, meaning, let's say it's somebody's home, so if it's going to be a disastrous type of rainstorm and potentially the building would fall apart, Rav Huna would either tell the person to reconstruct it or he would provide the money in order to help the person rebuild it himself. So again, we see this, this tension that rabbis have over Rav Huna. He takes initiative on his own, but yet, why is he on the golden carriage? Why is he passing along as if he's almost like king? Is that so that he can look down on everything, so he needs to be in a position of high up? Or is that because he is trying to assert himself as the person with money, the person with knowledge, and the person who basically can help everyone to get through disaster? So if you remember, we started with disaster being we're going to fast after a disaster in order to make sure that God helps us and protects us. But yet here we see that what is Rav Huna doing? He's going in before the disaster happens, which is a laudable thing. Now, of course, he commands. It's up to him to decide who can rebuild and who can't. And he sort of puts himself into that role of like the mayor or the person in charge of the city and tells everyone what to do. Now, I'm just going to move on. After discussing this issue of the rain, Rafram bar Papa now relates other aspects of Rav Huna. And the other aspect of Rav Huna, interestingly enough, is also about Rav Huna trying to help people to just live life, to just survive. So as a result, this is what it says also about Rav Huna. V'chol panya de ma'ale shabbata have mishader shlucha l'shuka v'chol yarka de have paye shluhu l'ginae zavinle v'shade le l'nahara. What would he do? Every Shabbat Eve, so this is Friday afternoon, in the afternoon, Rav Huna would send a messenger to the marketplace, and he would purchase all the vegetables that were left over with the people who brought them to sell. And he would purchase anything that was left over, and then he would throw them into the river. So we like the fact that, of course, he's buying up all the crops because he's basically making sure that these farmers have livelihood, and we like that. But we don't understand why he's throwing all the excess into the river. Wouldn't it have been better had he taken it and just given it to the poor, which is exactly what the Gemara says. V'leit ve la'aniyim. Give this to the poor. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? The Gemara answers, Zimnin, desamcha da'atayhu velo atu lemizban. Why is it? Because people might rely on the fact that Rav Huna would give out these vegetables. That Rav Huna would hand out these vegetables to poor people. And then when the poor people who would necessarily, would always be expecting them, then they wouldn't purchase anything. They wouldn't even try to earn enough money in order to purchase the vegetables. What they would do is they would assume if they waited long enough, Rav Huna would buy them all and give it to them for free. And that would not essentially be good. He wants to create a situation in which there is no welfare, that in fact you have to take the initiative. Even the poor people have to take initiative to try to buy as much as they can. and to try to earn enough money to buy as much as they can and not to give them too much support. So you can see like he's sort of still calculating. And then the Gemara suggests, maybe he should throw them to the animals. But no, the word kasabar, if you have it on the first line of page 3, goes with the next line. Kasabar ma'achal adam ein ma'achilin lebehema. He holds that human food may not be fed to animals. And then the Gemara goes back, v'lo lezibnei klal. But if Rav Huna could not use them in any way, he should not purchase the vegetables at all. Meaning maybe he shouldn't even bother purchasing these vegetables because he's going to just throw them down the river. Nimtzeit machshilan la'atid lavo. And then the Gemara answers, if nothing is done, you would have been found to have caused a stumbling block for them in the future. So if the vegetable sellers see that some of their produce is left unsold, the next week they will not bring enough for Shabbat, and therefore Rav Huna made sure that all the vegetables were bought so that the sellers would continue to bring them. They might bring less the next time if they knew that they had so much left over. And then if the poor people did come to try to buy, they wouldn't have enough. So Rav Huna is basically planning things out here. Now, how does this differ from Rav Ada bar Hava? So he's the social justice man. He's the person who is like thinking about how we're going to live in this world of everyday life, of farmers and rain disasters, and he's trying to figure out how, in fact, he can help those matters. He doesn't say anything about him learning Torah, although we understand he's Rav. It doesn't say anything about his wearing tefillin when he did it. It doesn't say anything really about his interchange and how he respected other people other than the fact that, of course, he cared about the farmers. But it's a very different image that we are getting about Rav Huna than we get about Rav Adar bar Hava, who was the man who, as I said, God channeled power through him. Now, interestingly enough, there are 3 more points in this text that I want to bring up that relate to Rav Huna. And this sort of turns the image of Rav Huna a little bit in the direction of a man who is doing really wonderful things. And so I'm just going to read. This is O, P, and Q. And so this is what it says. Ve'ika de amre milta de shifta hu gamir, v'have manach kuza de maya v'dalele. Ve'amar kol ditzrich le'te ve'le'ul v'lo delo listakein. So this is the case where there are those who would say presumably about Rav Huna, that he had, I think I skipped one. I'm sorry. I have to go back. Ki have le milta de asuta have male kuza de maye, betale le besefa de beta, the amar kol de baye le tevelish kol. So there's another custom that Rav Huna had, and that when he had medicine, he would fill up a jug of water with the medicine. He would hang it outside his doorpost, and he would say, anyone who needs it, come and get it. So he's sort of protecting, in that sense, the sick. And then they bring up in the next piece, and I'm sorry I read it beforehand, that there are those who say that it wasn't that he did, but he was really protecting everybody from the demon shifta, and that he knew by tradition that if you washed your hands, that would protect you from the evil spirit shifta. And therefore, he would place a jug of water outside his door, and anyone who needed it would be able to come to his house, wash his hands, so that they would not be in danger. You can actually see that he's always worried about danger happening, which I think is the rabbis channeling their fears about not being in control of everything. And then the Gemara then says that Rav Huna would also karach rifta have patach levade ve'amar kol man ditzrich le'teva le'chol. It sounds like the Haggadah there, right? So he would also put bread out, or he was eating bread, and he would open his doors, and anyone who wanted to come in could actually come in and eat the bread. And so he would say, whoever comes, who wants to come and eat. And then this piece of Gemara ends by saying, Amar Rava, kulhu matzina mikayamna lebar meha de lo matzina lemeavad mishum de nefishe bane chela de mechoza. And then Rava says, but you know what? I could do a lot of the things that Rav Huna does, but I can't do this one. I cannot open my house and give anyone who wants bread, because there are all these soldiers that are marching around Mechoza, where that's a city in Bavel, and if I do this, I won't have any food of my own. And so Rava says, there's a limit to what I really can do. Rav Huna actually went too far on some level, and I can't take as much initiative as Rav Huna. I can't do this to the extent that Rav Huna did it. And that's why maybe I'm not going to have God channeling through me. I mean, I'm reading in here. I'm not going to have God channeling through me what it is God could bring, or what God gave to Rav Adar bar Ahava. Now, pulling this all together and bringing it to relating this to Hanukkah, the reason why I really love this text is because it pits the idea of miracle against the idea of somebody taking action and their own initiative. And in doing so, it critiques on some level this notion of miracle, and it also critiques on some level our human initiative. So meaning, yes, you can take human initiative, and you should make sure before a disaster not to depend only on God, but to, rebuild and restructure your houses so they don't fall and they're not blown away. Yes, that is true. And we could act as Rav Huna does, and we could follow in his footsteps, but we don't want to go too far in the sense that we don't want to become so impressed with our own initiative that it kind of enhances our egos to the point where we feel so proud of what it is we're doing, we're willing to march around on a golden carriage and say, here I am, I'm great because I've done all these wonderful things. So it's wonderful to take initiative, but one always has to take initiative knowing what Rava is saying, which is we can only go so far because we ourselves are limited, meaning we only have so much in resource. And we also can't go so far as to take initiative that we feel almost like king, that we are in control, that we are telling who to rebuild and who to not rebuild, that we have to essentially have a little bit more humility when we take action. And so there's the miracle extreme, and then there's the take initiative extreme. And I think what Hanukkah is trying to teach us is that there's something that is in the middle, and that what we need to do is we need to confront all the possibilities that we have alongside all of our limitations, and think about how it is we might be able to be successful, and recognize that we make errors sometimes when we're trying to be successful, and then within all that have some sort of faith in God that what we're doing is happening because some part of God is being channeled into us or through us. And if we can strike that balance between faith and belief and action, then on some level what we're doing is that we're bringing together and enveloping what I think is the message of Hanukkah, which is to balance the two. And when I think about the Chanukiah, and this is kind of my non-academic hat, I think, speaking through, but when I think about lighting the candles specifically, or when I think about oil or an oil miracle per se, and the fact that oil gets lit, to me, it actually symbolizes the balance. Because when I light my Chanukiah and I look at those beautiful candles burning, and what I love to do, and I know you're not really supposed to do this, but I really love to have that Chanukiah sitting in the middle of my dining room table and use the light to study or to prepare whatever I'm preparing or to read. You're not really supposed to do that, but I love that because I'm just taking in that light. And I know that if I don't have light, it's darkness. In other words, if the light goes out or I don't have any oil, it's dark. Life is dark. And at the same time, if there's too much light, it might mean that it's destructive, right? It could be, that light could be destructive. If fire gets out of hand, it could be destructive. And I mean, I know that this has actually happened to friends of mine where on Hanukkah, the light flips over and it's burned something. So there's this moment where I'm looking at those lights and I'm in that perfect moment of balance where I'm thinking, wow, I can look at this and I can think about, yes, I want to have faith that God is essentially protecting me and is in my life and that this is all going to be safe and fine. But at the same time, I'm thinking about, I know that I can't only be there, that I need to, on my own, take initiative and to be involved in my community with limitation, and with recognizing that I'm just going to keep holding on to the fact that I need to be involved, and I need to recognize and figure out ways to help the people I live with. So that's essentially what I wanted you to see from this particular text. I want you, you're free to ask me whatever questions you want to ask me. I would love it if you have comments as well about some of your reactions to pieces of this story. You may not necessarily agree with the way I read every piece, and when I normally teach, I teach back and forth, and so I'm always hearing my students respond to me, and they're very comfortable arguing with me about how I see certain things, which is completely fine. And so I don't want you to be convinced that even the Sefaria translation is exactly right, or exactly the way I interpret it is 100% correct. So if you want to make a comment about any piece of this, wonderful. Okay.
Thank you. This is such rich material. I love it. I have so many thoughts. So I'm gonna take the prerogative here while I'm waiting for questions to come in. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts on a couple of things, not only as a Talmud scholar, but also another major piece of what you do, which is teaching methodologies. So this is taking me in two different directions. When you're talking about this balance between, it's like the partnership with God. How much do we rely on God and have faith in God, and how much do we step up ourselves, and the nuances of that. So I'm thinking of that in two ways. One is, kind of the shared responsibility to make the world a better place, the social justice, tikkun olam piece, which maybe is more relevant, drawing more directly on the sources. But what I'm really thinking about more is like the hashkacha pratit, schar va'onesh, pastoral side of things. So probably a lot of us in chaplaincy training, we hear this line, everyone believes in God in the hospital. Right? Like when we're struggling personally, people often cling to faith. And I don't know if this is true or not. I would kind of venture a guess that that's trickier maybe for some rabbis and scholars than a typical layperson, right? We have kind of an intellectual skepticism of that. I know I do.
But if I can just interrupt you for 1 second, I think that's sort of what I'm trying to say in the balance, and in trying to always keep that balance in mind. Like, we all want to believe that if we are good and we do wonderful things and we do mitzvot, that miracles will happen. Like we want to live our lives that way. And sometimes there are those of us, when something will happen, there'll be a near miss with your car, or you'll be in the hospital and they'll find something and everything's going to be fine, and you feel like a miracle has in fact happened. Whether that's true or not, I can't say, but I do think that we live our lives thinking, that we want those miracles, but at the same time, it's really important that we just don't live in that, and we just don't depend on that. Like, we need to always be taking initiative on our own, always, to be able to almost create the miracle. So, like, sometimes I'm studying and something will come to me and I'm wondering where it came from. Well, it's because I acted and put in the initiative to study it that the idea came. So maybe that's miraculous, but it's two things coming together. I think that's what I'm trying to get at.
I think we carry both of. I remember in high school, arriving at the door of a classroom that I hadn't finished the homework, and there was a sign that the class was canceled, and I had this hashkacha pratit moment, and then I was like, that's ridiculous. And I have sort of higher order experiences like that all the time now. But I think finding that place in between, I think it's hard. So what I wanted to ask you about is actually sorry, I neglected to mention, Tim already put it in the chat window, but the chat is not working for a lot of us, including me. If you do have a question, please email it to me. rabbinicresources@jtsa.edu. rabbinicresources@jtsa.edu. We apologize for that. So one of our colleagues, Paula McDrill, you know Paula.
I know Paula.
So she's, I don't think she's on, but I wanted to tell you something that she wrote, which was just posted. So Paula is going through chemo and radiation, and this blog post on her Shul website, the Orangetown Jewish Center, which I just read this morning, talks exactly about this. And I wanted to raise it because I think this is such a pastoral challenge for rabbis when you're talking with people going through difficult experiences who, right, it's like they want to believe in the miracle, but it's not real. Like, sort of, how do you counsel them through the reasons for their suffering? I mean, it's the oldest question in humanity. Right. So let me just tell you what Paula said, and I just love to hear your reaction and think about what you think rabbis can offer around this. She's talking about all the sources of support that she's had through this incredibly trying experience. From her community and all of that. And then she says, but nothing has been as powerful in my healing process as my faith in God. Make no mistake, I'm not saying that the seeming success of my course of treatment and potentially complete healing are the result of my faith. This is exactly what you're talking about, I think. God did not make me sick, and God is not healing me. I'm saying that my optimism, positive energy, gratitude, and sense of blessing, that those are all a result of my belief in God and that God cares about me. My spiritual life doesn't remove moments of fear and despair, but it gives me the ability to cope. Spirituality allows me to experience transcendent meaning in this precious life. She talks about different kinds of spirituality, but for me, my spirituality translates into an unshakable trust that God has plans for me. This idea has carried me through my treatment for cancer and will continue to carry me. Right, so that's I think this sweet spot that you're talking about, that God doesn't, that her sickness, neither her sickness nor her healing are a direct result of something that God is deciding, but that her faith is in some more transcendent way bringing her through this.
And I also think that's the point that Rav Yanai makes about like, you don't sit around in a moment of danger and just want the nace to happen and expect it to just come and happen. We shouldn't do that. We shouldn't sit around waiting for the miracle. Instead, she's actually reaching for the thing that is going to bring her comfort, which is God and tefillah and her belief. And it is true that, I mean, I happen to have a close friend who's going through also a very hard cancer experience, and it's been an extremely hard for my family and hard for me to get my head around, like, why this is happening. And I started to go to davening more because I felt I can't help. But maybe if I pray and maybe if I say Misha Berachs, that's going to help. Not that I really believe that it's God who's going to answer that, but I believe that it's giving me the sustenance. It's giving me the strength to deal. There's a certain power that I feel when I'm standing around people who are also joining me in saying words of prayer to God or mishaberaching. And again, it's not like I believe that God is necessarily going to heal. It's just that the being in it makes me feel comfort. So in the end, it brought me comfort. I started going more because I thought, okay, I'm just going to pray to God because God will just answer my prayers. But really what it gave me was, it's sustaining me. It's helping me. It's giving me strength. And so that's, what I've taken.
Right.
So
the idea of thinking of ourselves in partnership with God, whether our partnership involves, taking action in the world or kind of mustering spiritual resources,
right.
The partnership sort of is self-fulfilling.
Right.
So.
But I also think that in taking on whatever actions we take on, by keeping God always front and center, it helps us to not aggrandize, and become egocentric about what it is we are doing. It keeps us honest in a way. It keeps us sort of just as people before God. So we don't, okay, well, I've done this really amazing project, and I therefore should, be proud of myself, and I'm going to tell you all about why I'm proud of myself. I just don't think that that works. I think if we keep God front and center, we're always remembering that there is this thing out there that is just greater than us. So I think that to strike that balance, we have to find that sweet spot, which is difficult. The rabbis are basically admitting to you that it is difficult, that they can't quite do it themselves. But
I'm going to take a question in a second, but I just want to close this loop. So you're not a congregational rabbi, obviously, but but you have students, and I don't know. If someone comes to you with that kind of question, why is this happening? Why is God doing this to me? And that's really what they believe, that God is doing this to me. I don't know. What do you think we can draw from these sources to respond to that kind of theology?
So I think it's not to have the theology that God is doing this to me. I think we have to just separate, like Paul is saying, we need to separate out. She doesn't necessarily think that if she does X, God is going to do Y. I think it's that it's just living in the space in which there's something out there, and that there's this God out there, and that within that larger structure, and she says, all these people have come to my aid. All of these people have come to support me. And somehow when somebody does something really kind to me or for me, or I do something kind for somebody else and they appreciate it, somehow I feel a godly power in that. And I think that we can't underestimate what it is we do for each other and what these traumas bring out in the people in which we are living with. You don't really test relationships until things are awful. And you spend a lot of time in your life building those relationships, just like we build a relationship with God. And we should be doing that all along, so that when we get to this moment, we have both the ability to pray to God and the ability to also draw on our relationships. And so I think those two things need to happen, and to feel the gratitude for those relationships.
So maybe as rabbi, it's about working with people to kind of expand their theology in those ways.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to start taking questions because I took up all this time. And their questions are back to the text. Okay, so first from Rachel Jackson. So she expresses appreciation for this wonderful take. And here's what she writes about the text. Rav Ada is shown as a person who is nearly faultless, both bein adam l'chavero and bein adam l'makom, almost out of reach. Rav Huna, on the other hand, is nearly the antithesis in his dealings with people, but still almost out of reach. Do you think the juxtaposition of these characters is intentional, similar to what you're saying as a dichotomy of faith and miracles and personal initiative balance?
I guess I don't see them as much as you do out of reach, in the sense that when Rav Adar bar Ahava is described as a person who does mitzvot, they bring only tefillin. I guess maybe we're supposed to presume that he does everything right, but I'm not so sure I saw them as completely unreachable. And I thought Rav Huna also, I saw Rav Huna as us not wanting to exactly take his example, hook, line, and sinker. I think that Rav Huna was there to show us you can, in fact, take action, but you have to be very careful in the way in which you do it. And you can't be completely selfless, but you also can't be so proud of yourself that you have an ego about it. And I do think that Rav Huna was giving us that image of trying to find, in other words, he's provoking in us or generating in us the desire to find the balance, the right balance. We're going to make mistakes, but we're supposed to try to find the right balance. And so that's how I see the figures. So maybe Rav Adar bar Ahava is more out of reach for us on some level, but I don't know. It's like the things he does, I feel like I want to try to do. Like not be angry not to, unleash my anger among my family in the household, to keep things at bay, to not fall asleep on my students when they're saying interesting things or not interesting things. I just feel like I don't think it's so unreachable.
All right, so this draws directly on what you just said, from Adam Rubin. Adam, I think that I think there's one word missing, so now I'm missing a piece of your point. But he writes, it seems to me that the long list of achievements by Rav Ada bar Ahava and his magical, something's missing there, marks him and his approach as clearly superior in this regard to Rav Huna.
Right. Interesting. See, I see them as, yes, because he can channel God, so on some level I think the rabbis are presenting his approach as better. But the fact that they have Rav Huna there, and don't forget we have Rav Huna in his youth and then Rav Huna in his old age, I think is also showing us the growth of Rav Huna. So, I don't know, maybe repeat it one more time.
Am I missing a word in it? Okay. Adam, email me if you know what word I'm missing here. It seems to me that the long list of achievements by Rav Ada bar Ahava and his magical
so is superior to Rav Huna. But I guess on some level I think you're right, unless we are viewing the reasons for why Rav Huna and then Rava appear in the sugya as a way to balance out and give us another approach. Don't forget, Rav Ada bar Ahava is not supposed to be using his miraculous abilities all the time, right? If he does that, either he's going to lose some of his own merit or the person who he's doing it for is going to lose some of their merit. There's only so much. There's only a reservoir of so much that you can draw upon. So I think that it's not limitless in terms of what Rav Ada bar Ahava can do. And I think they bring in Rav Huna in order to show the other approach or another side, meaning Rav Huna of his old age. I do think that they're trying, the Gemara is trying to use Rav Huna to almost, I don't want to use the word critique, but to kind of align another image next to Rav Ada bar Ahava, to kind of say to us, this is maybe Rav Ada bar Ahava is the extreme on one end and Rav Huna is the extreme on the other end, to try to make us try to find something in the middle. To balance.
More on this from Benjamin Goldberg. What do you make of Rav Huna's use of Rav Ada bar Ahava as a miracle worker? Is that a way that he recognizes that there are limitations of the ability to fix all problems through his own efforts?
That Rav Ada bar Ahava thinks there's a way, or that the Gemara?
Or I think Rav Huna. What do you make of Rav Huna's use of Rav Ada bar Ahava? Is that a way that he recognized the fact that the way that Rav Huna relates to Rav Ada bar Ahava shows that he recognizes limitations on the ability to fix all problems through his own efforts? I think that's how I'm understanding it.
Well, I think that Rav Huna, so in his young life, I actually think it's kind of nice the way we get two Rav Hunas. That we get Rav Huna probably as a younger rabbi, or in his younger years, and then he grows through his relationships and through his experiences, grows into the person who isn't going to just rely on a Rav Ada. That he is the person who realizes that whether it's the wine in the house or the house that's going to fall down because of the rain, he needs to take initiative. So I make of it that he realizes that he can't always rely on Rav Ada. I mean, that's how I'm seeing this. It would be nice, but he can't always rely on him.
I heard back from Adam Rubin. So the word missing was powers, his magical powers. So he's responding to you also. He said, but Rav Ada in D admits that one shouldn't rely on miracles despite his powers.
That's correct. So in other words, I think that that's the setup for them bringing Rav Huna, who's not relying on miracles. It's true they want to tell us why Rav Ada bar Ahava actually has this ability, but they don't want us to rely on Rav Ada's ability. I mean, I think that's really the main point, is that we can recognize that God can do this, but we can't be reliant on it. We cannot, we have to always take our own initiative. And when we take initiative, we have to do it in a certain way. But
do you believe that?
That what?
That this partnership with God, that actually God, can and does, and, if God wants to, could make everything happen, but is kind of withholding and pushing us to act?
I don't think we can really understand God enough to know the answer to that question. And I think because we can't understand the answer to that question, it means that theologically, and that's why I like this sugya, we should believe in God, but not believe that God can basically do whatever God wants. Once we're in the position where we're thinking about God can do whatever God wants, we're in a position where we will be, why did you do this to me? I am now experiencing horrible suffering. How, God, could you have done this to me? I know you have the power not to do it to me. Like it doesn't work, I think. I think it works better to just see God as capable, but not what it is God wants us to do. God wants us to be living beings who create relationships with other people and take responsibility for the things that are in our midst. And we need to do that. And that initiative is really, when we succeed in those initiatives, I think that's when we feel best about ourselves and we develop a certain just self-satisfaction, which is what I think ultimately we want in life. But I think God is just beyond our understanding at that level.
Do you want to add anything on kind of with your pedagogical hat about? I think this is it's a great sugya for rabbis to. I could see a lot of people wanting to give this over, in schools or congregations. I don't know. Do you have any kind of guidance in terms of an approach?
Well, the first thing is it's heavily Aramaic, and that really is a challenge.
They'll probably do it in English.
But when you do it in English, then of course, you have to be careful in terms of the way you translate, as you know. So that's I think one challenge. I think it's important to contextualize it. This is what I tell my students all the time when they are teaching and they take like a passage out of a context, that they should give the larger context, in this case, which is that there is disaster and that you can fast, and there's this belief in the Mishnah that by fasting, that can be a sign of tshuva, that you are doing tshuva, and therefore you are saying, I did something wrong, and therefore something bad has happened to me, and if I fast, I can rectify it. So we can sort of, contextualize that image, which is there in the Mishnah, with this sugya, which is, I think, trying to unravel that. I think it's trying to critique it on some level, that you can't actually just presume that, when there's disaster, that it's coming from God and you can just fast and it'll all go away. No, you have to be like Rav Huna and you have to make sure that all the houses are secure when disaster is on its way, or something like that. Or even if you don't know it's on its way, it could be on its way. So I think that it's the context that really helps this source come to life. And, I think it's something that, I happen to be teaching this at the beginning of the semester, and, we were in the middle of, like these horrible rainstorms in the South, and where, universities and colleges and hospitals were closing. And so the news was this. And so I think this especially works when there's some type of natural disaster that's around, and how one responds to prepare, and then how one responds in the aftermath. I think it does help. So I would say that. And also one more thing, that it happens that there's a pasuk here about Yaakov and Esav, and some of my students have suggested teaching this in line with that story. About the deception, like a Parshat Shavua or something, So, well, it's 2 weeks ago, but
broader story that we're.
I would say that.
I think that's really helpful. Thank you. All right, so thank you for sharing this sugya with us, and it's this very cool. It's bringing in all these theological questions, but also really bringing them into the world, what it means in terms of our actions, how we relate to each other.
But if I can just add also that I think it's really important to see these rabbis as, they have the same questions that we do. They may not answer them exactly the way you might answer them, but they're struggling. And it's not like they read the Mishnah and they fast and they think really deep down it's all going to work out. they know that there are problems and limitations, and so I just want to kind of remind you that it's important to get the people you teach into this rabbinic project. Like, what is it that the rabbis are all about? And what they are all about is they're confused, and they're wondering about their relationship with God, and they want it all to work out, but sometimes it just doesn't. So
this is their conversation about core human questions.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So thank you for that, and thank you also for for sharing personally with us and bringing it all together. We wish all of you a happy Hanukkah. Thank you for joining us, and please do fill out the evaluation, and we will see you at our next webinar.